Hello and welcome to Collaborative Conversations in Wellness. I'm your host, Kendra Raymond, and I am thrilled to have Grace Harrington Murdoch here with me today. Hi, Grace.
Hi, everyone.
So, Collaborative Conversations in Wellness is an opportunity for me and many of my partners, Grace included, in the wellness industry to introduce you and educate you on some alternative and traditional therapies that can help you lead a more fulfilling, balanced, and joy-filled life. So today is really exciting for me because this was not really planned originally to be the first conversation, but a lot is happening in the planet and in the universe right now, astrologically speaking. And Grace, in my opinion, is one of the premier astrologers on the North Shore. So I'm thrilled to have her with me today. I am going to give you a formal introduction to Grace's work. So Grace Harrington Murdoch is an astrologer, teacher, and author and healer from Salem, Massachusetts. So I've met Grace through a mutual friend of ours, attorney Amy Connors. Big shout out. She's a super networker, and I just have loved Grace from the beginning. Grace teaches people how to embrace their shadow and amplify their light through all of her bodies of work. She's been teaching polarity therapy, narrative astrology, Reiki, and more for many years, sharing all that she's learned with her community. It's not uncommon, and I can attest to this, for people who come out of their spiritual closet after being around and learning from Grace. Her students have gone on to create healing and astrology practices and so much more. And I am one of those success stories, thanks to Grace. It's her philosophy that through understanding our natal chart and our soul essence, we can truly learn to love and accept every part of ourselves and come to wholeness with who we were born to be. So, Grace, welcome.
Thank you, Kendra. I'm so grateful to be here, and thanks for doing these conversations. I just think it's a wonderful idea and a great way to introduce people to all of the many facets of spirituality and wellness that there is to offer, which are so much. So,
So
yeah, thank
if your community is unfamiliar with my work, so I am an intuitive healer and wellness coach that started as a yoga teacher and personal trainer. And in my years of teaching and learning the body and the energy of the body, I now work with my clients to, they lay on my table, we do an energy session once a month, and then we create a profile of practices daily, weekly, monthly that they can be doing for themselves to create more balance. And I will be talking over the course of the next few months with many of the practitioners to whom I refer out work. So Grace and I will be doing a conversation on polarity a little bit later in the month, but today we're going to talk about astrology. So we all know, like, scientific fact that the moon can move the tides. I mean, that's not a mystery. And in more mainstream media, we're hearing about things like the full moon cycles, the retrograde cycles, which we happen to be entering into Mercury retrograde today, as well as, of course, the eclipses. So, Grace, obviously, it's a super vast topic, but could you give us a little bit of an overview of how the full moon, new moon, retrograde, and eclipse cycles might impact our energy or might impact the way that we interact with others?
Yeah, for sure. That's such a great question. And we're in such a potent time, as Kendra was saying. It's, as we're recording this, we're smack dab in the middle of eclipse season. Mercury retrograde started today. So I'm very impressed with us because our
Like,
technology is
joke's
working.
on us.
I know. I know. And April Fools, right? And this month we have a huge Jupiter Uranus conjunction that the all the astrologers are talking about too. But what does this mean for all of us? And I think that's just such a wonderful question. So, starting with the moon cycles themselves, as you said, it affects the tides, but the moons also affect our emotions, how we behave in the world. It
Our
affects
tides.
yeah, yeah. It affects our cycles of rest, of play, of work, and in our natal chart, there's arenas for all of those things for rest, for play, for feeling your emotions, for relationships. And as the moon moves around your chart, it starts to impact those arenas. So when you get to know your chart more, you can get really specific, but the full moon itself, is a real culmination time. The moon is opposite the sun, and so the moon is completely illuminated by the sun. And I like to tell people that because, when the full moon hits, that's a time when things in our life that are coming to fruition, coming to culmination, are very visible, just like the sun shining on the moon. So, a lot of times people do gratitude practices on the full moon because if there's something that you've planted the seeds of, let's say on the new moon, I'll talk about that in a second. By the full moon, we're usually seeing some culmination of that. So it's a great time to honor what's come to be, but it's also a great time to let go if, let's say, the seed you planted wasn't in your highest and best. We don't always know. Like, we plant intentions, we think that they're going to be like the best thing ever, and they're not always because we have a limited imagination of what's possible for us, right? So sometimes when the full moon hits, you go, ooh, I think I need to let something go here that's actually not serving me. And that can get illuminated as well. So it's a time of gratitude, of letting go. Whereas the new moon is a really great time to plant those seeds. The moon and the sun are side by side. We can't see the moon at that point with the naked eye. So we're thinking that this is kind of like a ripe void space, and that's a time when it's really a good time to think about what is my intention for this month ahead and how can I put that out there in a strong way. And so planting those seeds, and even in nature, the new moon is a good time to
Fallow
plant
field,
physical seeds. Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And so, if you can follow those cycles within yourself, you'll really start to get into harmony. And there's all the phases in between, and I'm happy to even give people my tracking lunar cycle um, uh, PDF and stuff like that through you if you'd like, but just so people can start to track it, because there's more cycles in between where you can really harness those energies. Um, Now, Mercury retrograde's a little bit different. Mercury retrograde is really when Mercury appears to be going backwards in the sky. I always liken it to, have you ever been in a parking lot and you start to pull your car backwards and it looks like the other car is moving at the same
I love
time?
that. I love that. That makes so much visual sense to me about, I know what Mercury retrograde is energetically, but I love that.
Yeah, it's kind of like, so Mercury is appearing to be going backwards in the sky based on how we're moving. And when this happens, this is a really good time to go inward around the messages that we've been giving to the people around us, the communication we've been having, really refining that and figuring out how can I do that better. It's a really great time to just re-examine and reevaluate, how you're communicating. So it's a good time for that. And and it's not the best time historically always, but again, I always say to people, follow your intuition because, sometimes you're going to get a hit to like buy a car during Mercury retrograde, but it's not usually an amazing time to make big decisions that involve technology. Like, don't buy a new phone during Mercury retrograde if you can, like, wait until it's over. The reason being is it's a re-examining period. So if you, do that, what can happen is that, months down the road, you can have to re-examine that again, and there might be something that shows up that goes wrong with it. But so it's just a time to really be mindful of how you're communicating and what you're communicating, and again, follow your intuition on big decisions. If you're signing any contracts, make sure you really read them like front to back. It doesn't mean you can't. That's the thing. There's a lot of fear out there that
Like
drives me
fear out
nuts.
there. This is why we're having these conversations, because
Yeah.
what's put out in the media is just cute, funny little memes, but when you get it, they hit that much harder, you know?
Yes, it's so true. It's so true.
I just
Yeah. So,
note personally. So I first started working with Grace during the pandemic. I, of course, had been introduced to her prior to that, but my business was in people's homes. I was in 22 private homes a week, and that had to shut down for me. And I
mm,
really just needed to re-examine things. So we started to. I took Grace's Manifesting Your Magical Business course. Big fan, huge shout out. And then I also was gifted a narrative astrology birth chart reading, and we walked through my birth chart. So what I've started to do just really in the last 4 years is simply at the very beginning. Hey, notice it's a full moon. I know it's a full moon. I'm going to start to pay closer attention to the patterns that exist in my life during these times of the month.
yeah.
I just started to do the same with the new moon and the retrogrades. And all that helps me do is recognize the patterns and where I might be able to make some shifts and changes that will just make those patterns easier for me.
Yeah.
Less suffering. I'm all for less suffering. There's plenty of suffering in our human lifetime that just exists in the world around us. Let's
Mm.
try and create as little suffering on our own behalf as possible. So that's what the basic astrology of following the moon cycles has just started to do for me. And then I like opened it up to my whole chart, and it's a whole situation now, Grace. Um, but can you talk a little bit about the importance beyond the beauty and the rareness of this solar eclipse that's coming up a week from today? Can you talk a little bit about the energy of that and the shadows that an eclipse brings out?
Yeah, totally. So, yeah, eclipses are oftentimes, so when you see eclipse season, again, out there in the media, eclipse season is often a time where we're looking at the shadow side of life. Sometimes it's actually the shadow side of the feminine because we're dealing with the moon. So sometimes you'll see that popping up. Um, and really how you can own your power. I'm sure you work with a lot of women in your practice and like really understanding how you can dive into that deeper. And sometimes things will come up to show you that. But also, eclipse cycles can, there's oftentimes surprises that come through during eclipse cycles in our lives. I know,
Don't say.
with Kendra, yeah. There's, even just this weekend, and for me
Yes.
too, there's been these moments of like, oh, where did that come from? But I expect it now. I'm like, okay, it's eclipse season. Things come out of the blue because they're hidden, just like the moon gets hidden during this time. So, and the sun. And um, so with this particular, eclipse season, we are dealing with the polarity between Libra and Aries. So March 25th, we had the full moon lunar eclipse in Libra, and now we're going into the new moon total solar eclipse in Aries on April 8th. And Libra and Aries are all about relationship to others, which is Libra, and relationship to ourself, which is Aries, and this balancing act between the two. And it's been really interesting. I've been watching people post and see, what's coming up for them. And for a couple of my really good friends, one of the things that came up was that they had been neglecting their self care for someone else or even new puppies and things like this. And then all of a sudden they realize, which, is a very Aries realization, like, oh, I need to take care of my own self and balance this back out. So you might be dealing with some themes around that are again, opening that doorway and helping you claim more of that. Or vice versa. Maybe you haven't been nurturing your relationships and you haven't been pouring into them in the way that they deserve. And so there might be some of that theme coming up too. But this particular new moon is also conjoined, or we say it's united with the planet, with the asteroid Chiron, and Chiron is the wounded healer. So this can be a time of deep healing for all of us, healing our identity, our sense of self, our sense of worthiness, of what we deserve. And so we might be seeing themes of that, either a couple weeks before this April 8th eclipse, a couple weeks after. And then I will say 90 days from April 8th is another turning point with the eclipses. So you can pay attention then as well. But it's definitely a time of healing the self and forging ahead. You know, Aries is the warrior
Mm,
archetype. So how can we be brave and heal the things that maybe we don't want to look at or recognize, but I would say to people, don't give up. Aries is all about developing that deep self um, reserve to be able to face whatever our dragons are. And Chiron is saying, let's heal them. Let's move
yes.
through this. So, yeah, it's a big time.
And again, just a little personal note here to kind of put it into some like real perspective, because you and I understand this language. And
Yeah.
again, noticing the patterns, but on the full moon, I had an opportunity with another healer friend of mine to take advantage of one of her practices, which is a regressive past life hypnosis therapy, and had been doing quite a bit of shadow work since 2020 with another of my partners who I will be featuring here. And it really was this time of revisiting some things and taking a bit of a deeper dive to kind of wrap up some of that shadow healing that I'd been doing. And it has allowed me to be brave in the face of, scary things like my son's kind of emergency surgery that went well yesterday, and some other kind of deeper, darker things from my past and my present that I'm now ready to just move beyond and use as fuel. So, what I invite people to do is start to recognize your patterns, but most importantly, what's not working, because you might not know what's gonna work. So, I always go like, well, what's not working? Start there and
Yeah.
just don't do it anymore, or just kind of change the pattern. And what will work will kind of just come. Again, planting a seed, you don't know what the flower is ultimately going to look like, but if you keep tending to it, you will find out. And it may be more beautiful and unique than you could have imagined. And if it isn't, there's still more seeds to plant.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's like I always say, like every month we get a new opportunity to do this over again. I mean, every day too, right? But if you're working with the lunar cycles, you've got to every month you can try again and get a little bit bigger with what your capacity to hold that goodness in your life is. Go a little bit bigger. And I love what you said, if you can just maybe just look at that one thing that's not working and revise it. That's beautiful.
Like start small, people. It's
Yeah.
really, I started small about 30 years ago, and it's taken some time, but it's so worth it. And I just think astrology is a really fun and unique way to learn about yourself in a way that's going to create growth that you didn't know you were capable of.
Yeah. Yeah.
It just brings you a little bit closer to your soul essence when you understand that we are all guided by the same universal forces, and we are unique within there. So, therefore, we have gifts to bring about. And that is what astrology has done for me.
Yeah, yeah. It's very much about embodying the fullness, of who you are and really being able to see yourself as who you are. The chart is really a mirror of who you are in your fullness, both shadow sides, light sides, the whole, kit and caboodle. And that's where we can really find our home and ourselves. And, I often think like in society and our families, there's a lot of projections of how we should be and how we should behave. But what's beautiful about the chart is it's sort of beyond social conditioning and it's just your unique
Yes.
blueprint. It's like we're each little snowflakes, just trying to radiate our beauty. And the chart helps us see who we are, So yes,
So,
yeah.
and this will be my final point before we wrap up, but I love your analogy of the snowflake, because part of my work and the way that I would say work with grace, for example, would be your work can help them see that mirror, and I can help them recognize like, where should you fall so you don't melt? How can you avoid the elements that will melt you? Like
Mm,
how can we bolster your uniqueness so that you can walk through the world? And I might have you on the table and go, I think a deeper understanding of who you were born to be might be very helpful. And there are some clients who that may not resonate with, but that's why I have multiple partners. But for people who it might resonate with, I'd be like, hey, here's a great astrologer who could help you understand how to work better with your own cycles.
Yeah, beautiful.
That's how we work together. And it's
Love
just,
it.
I just love the work. I love people who are authentically, passionately into their work. And you are certainly the real deal, my friend. So,
Oh, thank you. As are you, Kendra. Oh my gosh, I love it. I love
and
it.
I want to be sure to make sure people know how to reach out to you. So if you've not already been introduced to Grace through me or been referred to her by me, you can find Grace at her new website, which is Grace Harrington Murdoch. All of this will be in the notes as well. GraceHarringtonMurdoch.com. And all of her current classes are at flowersandstarsshop.com. And it just so happens that your narrative astrology course is launching this week, yes?
Yes, yes. I thought that was so synchronous of
I
us.
mean, well timed. Then
Yeah.
this just happened. I had my chiropractor lined up. I had a Tongren practitioner lined up, an acupuncturist, but we can't make it happen till much later in the month. And this just,
It just
yes,
flowed. Beautiful.
really was.
Kendra and I are good at stepping into the flow together, which I
Well,
love.
I have only been introduced to that concept, uh, or I should say, embraced it through you.
Oh,
And what I find hilarious is I think we've actually only met in person probably 2 or 3 times, and
yeah.
briefly at that.
Yes,
So,
yes. I know it feels like we've met more for some reason. I think our souls know each other at another
uh,
level.
but what I
Yeah.
love is that the pandemic for me was so scary coming into it,
Yeah.
and it has changed my life and like just catapulted the growth potential really through things like this, through technology. Look at what it's done. I mean, your course really helped change the course of my business.
Yeah. Yeah.
And understanding more about my astrology helped change the course of my confidence. So technology has changed us. Things in the media do not have to be as scary when we can understand ourselves within
Yeah.
that context better.
Yes, absolutely. And adapt and pivot and be able to, be resilient, which I think, seeing people like you in your practice can really help bolster up that ability to move with the tides and the energy and, just open up. So yeah, I'm so grateful for technology. I think I wouldn't have my healing space if it wasn't for, being able to pivot into offering courses online and things like that. So yes,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Well, this has been great. I thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to our discussion on polarity coming up.
Yes, me too. Thank you so much, Kendra. I
Happy
appreciate
Eclipse season. I wish you well. I know you'll do just fine.
it. All right.
All
Thank
right,
you.
take care. Bye bye.